Hello and welcome to the Newsweek AI Impact Forum. Welcome to our monthly edition of it. And this is where we discuss the impact of AI on business, societies, people, and nations. And today is a very special one because today we're going to discuss a nation, India. Now, if you remember all our uh, webinars in the past, we have talked about how AI impacts IT services with Frank D'Souza, how it affects SaaS with Tiger, how it creates new business models with native AI services with Kevin. Well, all of those were focused on the United States. Today, we're going to talk about India. And why India? It's obviously one of the largest economies in the world, the fourth largest. The equity markets are close to $5 trillion, and they happen to be the fifth or the sixth largest equity market in the world, and one of the hubs of technology and tech services businesses, which are significantly impacted by AI. In fact, if you look at the last 6 to 12 months, you would have noticed that it's gone through a little bit of a roller coaster. The total market has gone through a little bit of a downtick, especially the IT services firms, which have dropped close to 30% since January, and maybe even 45% if you were to go year before that. So we are catching India at a very interesting inflection point in its journey, and to take us through that is none other than the CEO and managing director of the National Stock Exchange, Mr. Ashish Chauhan. He's joining us from Mumbai, and with me here is Kyle. And Kyle is my partner in crime. Please remember to ask me questions. This is a live webinar. So if you have any questions that need to be discussed, I'll be happy to take them, and Kyle will help me take you through that. Now, I before I jump into the substance of today's discussion, I did want to spend a little bit of time on Mr. Chauhan, who I have now known for close to 15 years. He's a man who's led many lives and great lives. Um, the whole equity markets revolution in India started in the late 90s, and Mr. Chauhan was the founding member of the team that started the National Stock Exchange, and he was the one who actually set it up so that today it actually accounts for more than 90% of all stock transaction volumes in India. The other big stock exchange is the BSE, or the Bombay Stock Exchange. After having established the National Stock Exchange, Mr. Chauhan spent a little bit of time with Reliance, where he was the group CIO, and during that time, he was also the CEO of Mumbai Indians, which is a franchisee team in one of the world's largest sports leagues, the Indian Premier Club. And it is during this period that I got to know Mr. Chauhan, and we've been keeping in touch since then. But after Reliance, he actually joined as the Bombay Stock Exchange CEO and managing director, where within 8 to 10 years, he had completely transformed that exchange. Not only in terms of the technology, it had become the fastest stock exchange in terms of latency across the world. He had expanded that exchange to not only focus on equities, but a whole set of asset classes, including currencies, commodities, even startups. And he was the one who introduced financial derivatives, equity derivatives in India. And many regard him as the father of financial derivatives in Indian capital markets. Um, After the Bombay Stock Exchange stint, the way he ended was he took them to an IPO, and then he joined as the CEO of the National Stock Exchange, where he has been for the last few years. And once again, it's been a fantastic story of transformation where he's again leading them through National Stock Exchange's IPO. So I couldn't find a better person than Mr. Chauhan to talk about how is AI impacting companies in India, especially around the tech and AI space. So welcome to the show, Ashish. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Ranjit. Wonderful to be here with all your listeners.
Ashish, I mean, I said you are a man who's led many lives. The one that's most interesting to me is the Mumbai Indians CEO role, but that is not the topic of today's podcast. We'll catch up on that separately. But do tell us a little bit about your journey, because in some ways it mirrors India's growth story over the last 20 years, um, and some key inflection points.
In a way, India used to be considered a up and coming nation for very long, but we had a large population growing very fast in early 90s. And I was an engineer, just came out of an MBA school. So I went from IIT Bombay to IIM Calcutta, which was like a um, west coast to east coast, and then came back to Bombay to work at a bank. And I was a banker um, in project finance kind of areas, long term finance. And I used to fund power projects and other things. But I had a kind of an understanding of how um, the personal computers work, and that's where my bank had bought a lot of computers when I joined, but nobody was using them except few of us who were youngsters and who had kind of worked on it as engineers or during their MBAs. And so few of us started working, and I got a reputation of working on spreadsheets. Those times it used to be called Lotus 123. And so I got a reputation that this guy is an expert in computers, which was not true, because I was actually a mechanical engineer who had not
Mm,
worked full time in mechanical engineering either. And so it was funny that how you get reputation, and then because of that reputation, when NSE was to be set up after a large scandal in Indian stock markets in 1992, which is still known as Harshad Mehta scam. And so when my bank was given the responsibility of setting up a national stock exchange, five people were selected, and I was the only engineer in the team. Um, and those days, New York Stock Exchange was on floor. Nasdaq used to have screens, but only to see the quotes. If you traded, you had to do it on phone. Chicago was on floor, and London was on floor, and Japan was on floor. So everyone was on floor, and India had a very limited access to telephone lines those days, and many of them kind of didn't work through the day, and so we had to kind of um think through how we will connect the entire country, do screen-based order matching system, and other exchanges in India were all floor based, like Bombay Stock Exchange, and there were 22 other exchanges. And so we thought of setting up a satellite telecom network first time for trading in stocks. And people from across the country could place orders, get execution done in less than a few seconds. Less than 2 seconds is what I used to promise people, because the satellites were on the geostationary orbit. Many of us have become aware of um, the SpaceX and other things. They are in the low Earth orbit. We were having satellites which were geostationary, which means around 36,000 kilometers on top. And so we used that. India had few of them. We used that using some new technologies, and it worked, and worked so well that NSE became larger than BSE in almost 11, 12 months of its existence. And it connected the entire country in a commercial way, which was unheard of. And it was also the fact that computers were new, especially personal computers were new across the world, and we could kind of do this in a country which was not known as a technology powerhouse. It was interesting. And then later on, of course, Y2K and other things came. India became known for its technological prowess. But largely, the story of India's IT, actually, in your face IT, where people use it in day to day life, started literally with NSE. And today, more than a billion people uh, participate, give and take a few, using mobile phones. So we actually leapfrogged the entire landline revolution, the entire uh, computer revolution in terms of the personal computer, straight away it came into people's hands via mobile. And so it was quite interesting. Those days, probably a million people participated in stock markets. Today, NSE alone serves almost 130 million people, more than 130 million people, unique people, 260 million accounts. And that's pretty much, if you were a country, you would have been probably in top 10 in the world. It has
Mm.
listed market capitalization of more than $5 trillion. And it's literally the largest platform of trading with now nanoseconds response time. 1 second is a billion nanoseconds, and we give you response time between 600 and 800 nanoseconds today. So it's a technologically quite an advanced sort of exchange. But what it did is that it allowed more people to participate. That small little savings across India could be channelized into capital investments by way of shareholding. And that's where, from a million and a half people in 1994 when we started, to now 130 million plus, is a sort of a journey which many of us have seen ourselves. We have been kind of particip- we have been partners to that, or participants in that. And then later on, I joined the Reliance Group, which is the largest business house, as their head of IT, and few other things, including, as Ranjit said, in setting up a cricket franchise for them, where I was the CEO as an additional job. And then I joined BSE, then later on back to NSE 4 years back. So that's the short story, or a long story, of my professional career.
It's fascinating. You know, the part that I noted the most is today, if you're in the US, we talk a lot about forward deployed engineers, where you are an engineer at heart, but you are in the client situation solving their business problems. I think your deputation from IDBI Bank to the National Stock Exchange, you're probably one of the first few forward deployed engineers, if you were to use today's language. It's funny how the cycle comes one full circle, right? You're right in the
Absolutely.
middle of the situation, solving the problem.
And without even knowing that you will be doing this job as a career in your
Yeah,
life.
exactly. Exactly. No, it's a fascinating story, and I would love to continue to delve into it. But our viewers have a number of questions around the broader topic of India, and is India on the right side of the AI trade? Right. That's the framing for this discussion. And maybe I should start with a report by an independent research firm called Bernstein. It is a subsidiary of Allianz Bernstein, which is a global investment management firm. And many of you may know that a few months ago they sent an open letter to the Prime Minister of India, warning him about the disruptive risks of AI to India, and how India should respond. And in that letter, they use the word India has the risk of becoming a permanent customer. Now, I'll explain what that means. What basically it said was that India does have one of the largest tech talent pools in the world, nearly 10 to 15 million technologists. If you look at GCCs, BPOs, IT services companies, but they are at risk of being disrupted by AI, which may do some of the job. And as you know, software engineering is one of the largest use cases in AI. So they felt that this could be quite disruptive. But what is even more disruptive is not so much that, but that all of these 10 to 15 million people will be working on LLMs and training those LLMs with data. And in some ways, India is helping these LLMs become even stronger. And these LLMs don't belong to India, they belong to the United States or China. So is India in some ways, uh, being left behind on this whole innovation around LLMs? And therefore, does India essentially become, thanks to its talent pool, a permanent customer because they don't have their own LLMs? You have gone on record to say, no, in fact, you think quite the opposite. AI creates a major opportunity for the Indian economy. And I'd love for you to reconcile those two perspectives for our viewers.
No, thank you. I think it's a pertinent question, and the fact is, India today has come up a little in the economic progress, and that's why people can sort of think that India should have also had its own development or fundamental models or frontier labs, as they are known in LLMs and other things. But if you look back in 60s, 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even 2000s, India did not invent computer chips, nor it invented the operating systems, nor relational databases, nor computer languages. But when an opportunity came, especially through Y2K, millions of Indians understood, probably self learned, had confidence because of the education system India has. And India has been a perennially capital uh, sort of capital lacking country. So India spending $1 billion or $1 trillion is a different world vis-a-vis anyone else, because today also per capita income is around $3,000 compared to that US has a per capita income of almost $89,000. And China is also in the range of 15 to $17,000. So India has been perennially capital lacking country, and that's why investing into anything which is long term, many people are not used to. But that doesn't mean like we didn't invent the computer chips, nor the languages, or nor operating systems, nor memories, nor nothing, right? But we became the largest user group of the world, and we did not use it for ourselves. Of course, we are now literally the most advanced IT using country in the world. I mean, I have traveled across the world. I teach at some of the Western countries, and of course, China also has been a place where I visited many times. But India is one place where uh, everything comes, and we become the best users, and then use it for the world. Like if you look back during COVID, most countries went into closed down. They shut off everything, including the roads and other things. But the banks worked because the Indians were doing back office work for entire world. Indians were also working 24 by 7, and that is true with the the Amazon, and I mean every retail stores, every even the IT company, or even the product companies like Microsoft. There are people working out of their homes in India and supporting the world. The hospitals ran largely because Indians were working 24 by 7. And that's what gave the confidence to the world that this country is not only doing IT usage for itself, but also for the world. The other part is that Indians got a lot of exposure by people like you, went abroad, learned things, how those systems work across the world. And then that exposure has also helped India learn from all its diaspora. And so for me, you don't have to be inventing something to be the best users. Again, if you go back, say 2000 years back, Indians were the inventors of decimal system, what we know as the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the zero part, Indians invented. And we were pioneers those days. But then Arabs learned from us, then they took it to Europe. And so Arabs call it Hindu numerals because it came from India. And the Europeans call it Arabic numerals because Arabs took it there. But broadly, the Europeans learned, or rather used it better than Indians. And that's how India got subjugated in 15th century onwards. And for me, that's why you don't have to be the inventor to be the best user, especially as a society. And in a situation like this, you need to, I mean, there are two types of uh, sort of adages. One says that the early bird gets a worm, and other one says the exactly opposite, is that if you have patience, you will have better fruits coming out of the trees, right? So uh, in our situation, I think been last 2 3 years when ChatGPT started, people had lots of hopes about it changing the world. It was marketed that way by people who came out with these models, and then many more sort of frontier labs came out of US, and they kind of made a point, that this is a game of $1 trillion investments. If you don't have, as a country, if you don't have a company which can invest $1 trillion, don't come into the table. You are not in this game. Uh, Parallelly, China was developing its own model of doing the same AI, but in a different way. And that's where I think over last 3 years or 4 years since ChatGPT started, I've been like sort of active user, but also observer of all the technology trends, because we are actually one of the most intensive technology user companies in the world. We get like 22 billion orders in 6 hours and 15 minutes, and we have to give answer every time, right? So uh, we are one of the biggest users of technology in a smart way in the world, and so I need to keep track of what's happening, and that's where for me, last September, that is September 2025, I had done a tweet. Usually, because of this position, which is also position which is of a regulator, I usually don't tweet nowadays. But on that day in September 25, I think I had tweeted saying that America has a framework of us sort of going for something which is very large cost and also closed source. And China is quietly trying to issue open source softwares, even in the LLM world. And slowly, the lower side of the, or the not so sort of high end items, people will start using Chinese models, and that will actually collapse the business models for American companies, which are investing heavily. After that, of course, all of them declare their 200 and $300 billion worth data center investments and all sorts of things. But broadly, for me, I still remain very, very aware that India today has almost 250 million AI users every day. I mean, if I look at the number of users, America is probably close to 160 million, and China is close to 130 million. Europe has probably 100 million people who daily use it, on as per the surveys and as per the data coming out of the companies, the frontier labs, and all. And that's where, for me, Indians are still the best adapters and users of this new technology that has come up. It's going to change life fundamentally, transformationally. But in the long run, in the short run, many of the promises which are being made today, or which have been made in last a year or two, about it changing the world instantly, immediately, and all of us losing our jobs, I think those are the things may not turn out to be true, and I hope they don't. But in the long term, it will be transformational. At the same time, how do you use it in real life, in your machines, in your mixer grinder, in your television, in your fridge, even in your headphone? And that's where I think the open source model allows millions and millions of people to try that out. And that's where India is very good at, because they don't have capital, but they have a lot of brains, right? And so, and a lot of exposure of providing solution to the world. And that's where I think more and more GCCs, global capacity centers, are being sort of created in India by largest companies in the world. Today, India has around 3.5 million people employed by Indian companies in India for doing IT and BPO work, and 2.5 million people employed by the global capacity centers, which includes the top companies, but even the mid-sized companies are now coming. And that's where literally 6 million people who are experts at solving problems, and AI will allow you to solve even larger problems at a lower cost, right? And that's where India's low-cost labor, which is extremely smart, extremely tech-savvy, and now largest in user of AI already, is going to give solutions not only in the closed LLM models, but also the open source or open weight LLM models. And that's what is happening as we talk. And you will see that over a period, probably it was in a way by accident, or not by design, that we did not create our own models. We are now creating some models. We have Sarvam, Bharatjan, and few other models coming up. But over a period, Indians are going to be again using AI not only for India but rest of the world.
Interesting. For our users who are not deep in this whole world of LLMs, just I'll give you a framework which I'll use with Ashish through the rest of this conversation. Basically, AI, you could think of the AI stack as being made up of four layers. There is the applications, which actually use AI to do different types of jobs, under which is the LLMs, the actual AI models that help you enable those applications. Those models then learn on a stack, which is the semiconductor chip stacks, and these chips are powered by energy. So applications, LLMs, semiconductors, and energy. And I see a number of our webinar attendees asking questions and all parts of those layers. Please be patient. I'll come to all of them. But Ashish, to synthesize what you were saying in answer to my question, is India at a competitive disadvantage because they don't have their sovereign LLMs? Your answer is pretty clear. Uh, Given India does not have the size of risk capital that a large economy like the US has, India has a different way to get to competitive advantage. The first is there is a lot of value trapped in the application layer that I just described, and Indians have had a track record of showing value creation there. The second, the Chinese are giving these LLMs as open source, and that is significantly going to reduce the economic barriers to be using those LLMs. And there's a third point you said, which you and I have discussed this in the past, but I wanted to highlight for the audience, the word SLMs. You don't need large language models to run refrigerators and toasters. But in the world of the future, uh, frankly, the number of applications that require small models, not large models, will be far more than the large models. And if India has less capital to invest in the type of research that's required to build large language models, maybe the innovation happens in the small language models. I mean, Ashish, this is not my thoughts. This is something you had explained to me earlier. But is that something you meant to imply when you talked about refrigerators and other appliances?
Absolutely. See, today also I was looking at some of the experiments my people were running. Uh, if you understand how uh, the the entire journey of what we now know as AI came, it was earlier called fuzzy logic, which would give you answers which are not deterministic. That is not specific. They would give you answers somewhere in between, and then it became neural networks, and then it became machine learning, and some another name, and then slowly it has become artificial intelligence. But those days, 30, 40 years back, when we were learning to program, the brute force that is required was not available in terms of the memory chips or the speed or the scale that could be achieved in terms of getting those iterations, starting with a particular assumption of an answer and then iterate very fast to get you that answer. Today, the world in terms of computing has reached that level of memory and the computing power that it has reached. In a way, it's able to do brute force. This is, in a way, a brute force method of training and brute force method of executing things. But in iterations, in any iteration, if you see Ashpelian estimation, these are estimating answers. And in any estimations, if you think, after some times, like 10, 15, 20, 30 steps, every time the next step will get you a lesser sort of additional benefit. The marginal benefit will be close to zero. And so the the model which has been trained to run on say 30 iterations vis-a-vis say 30,000 iterations, the differential in normal mundane stuff will be close to zero, right? So whether you use a small model which is like a Quen 32 GB or Gemma or other stuff which are very small models vis-a-vis 2.6 trillion or 2.8 trillion dollar, I mean, 2.8 trillion parameters models, it's basically how many times it iterates, what kind of uh, sort of a scaling window it goes back to. But broadly, for me today, a 32 GB model works reasonably well for most of our day-to-day activities, and that's where, for me, I can see like literally many new models are coming up based on the previous models. and they're learning from each other. Like many times, people also say that that party from China or other places learned from our model, and that's why they should not be allowed to learn. But you also learn from the books of the earlier places and the videos and other things. How is it that you could learn and other people could not learn, and things like that, right? So for me, those things. The other part, which was very interesting, you mentioned in passing, was that uh, the way the American entire what I call uh, position was that we are so good, we are so far ahead, and it's going to be whoever is owning this frontier labs will own 95% of the value addition that comes out of AI. And the rest of the world will have to probably do it in that 5% if at all we allow you to have those crumbs. And I think slowly you will realize that ultimately those crumbs will become larger. They will become 95%. And the other things which you give, what you were thinking was 95%, will remain 5%, largely because the usage is going to be very important. That's where your framework of small language model or whatever one calls it, is that it is to be appropriate. Today, even in that same next tweet of mine was that, broadly speaking, the battle of LLMs is over. Mostly open source will win. This is in September 25. But the next battle is in how to use AI in day-to-day life, in robots, in drones for defense, in your car, in your scooters. Like in India, most of us use two-wheelers rather than cars, and generally day-to-day life. And that's where open source will allow people to do it at lower cost, also allow them to tweak things and integrate with their type of usage, install it in their own small little equipments they make. And that's where the next battle is there. China is thinking ahead, America is not, right? So that's where the moral of that story was that SLMs would be there, but even the mobile phones today are so much more powerful than the mainframes in the days when I used to study computers, or in sort of mid 80s. That similarly, the small little handheld things like mobile phones will be able to also host its own language model,
SLMs.
and will be able to answer. In fact, today Apple is trying to do that. And for me, you will see that less traffic will go. The world has moved. Like if you see Unix was always centralized, and then the PCs came, which was decentralized, and then uh, servers came, which were somewhere in between, the client server part of life, and then cloud came, which again became centralized, and then mobiles came, which became less centralized in a way. So each time the world will move from one pendulum side to another pendulum side, and that's where slowly you will see the smallest of equipments are going to have their own language models, which will also require to be updated, upgraded. Specific use language models might be there. Even real life language models will be there, which is not what large language models are. They are more about non
So,
real life and stuff like that. So it's going to be a lot of evolution that we will see in the next 5, 10, 20 years. And it's going to be about people who use it more effectively, the societies who use it more effectively, not the ones who keep on saying that I will not allow anyone to use unless you give me a very large toll that 95% is kept with me of the value addition. Other people will slowly move away, and that happened to even the operating systems of mainframes and servers, where slowly, when Linus Torvald came with Linux, people were skeptical. Today, Linux actually runs uh, all the LLMs, and it's open source, right? And so, for me, it's very strange to ever be thinking that what we are saying today is going to remain true forever. It will change with situations, and I have no doubt in my mind that what we have seen is a small trailer. The larger part of the movement of AI, what we know as AI is currently LLM. There are many more variations of that is going to come, and it will certainly change the life transformation, like what electricity did. Electricity took long time to do things. But today we could not be talking like you are sitting in New York, I'm sitting in Mumbai, and we are talking. It's all thanks to electricity, right? And it will be so transformational, the AI, that it will almost like electricity, but it'll take its time to get into our lives. It has to be affordable, and that's what the open source does to the world, right?
I think, this topic is so rich, but it is definitely a very distinct and alternative view on the current view where we have trillion-dollar valuations in some of these LLM models. And you're saying this is just phase one of a story where the real innovation is not just about building those LLMs, but actually using them and using them effectively and cost effectively. And that's where you might see variants of LLMs. SLMs is an example that may still be yet to be invented. But let me use that to switch a little bit. We talked about applications, the top layer. We talked about LLMs. Under those LLMs are semiconductors. Now, here's a fact. Ashish, that if you look at the global MSCI index, for those of you who don't know, this is the index which is like the S&P 500 for all of the world. So all the stocks from around the world are listed in that. And in that, the weightage for one stock, TSMC, which is a Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company and a world leader, has more weightage than all of the tech services companies in India combined, right? And that at least as of today tells us that some of the research and development that we saw in TSMC in Taiwan played a significant role in value creation now. India does not have the same pedigree in semiconductors. um, that doesn't mean it cannot. I know that the Indian government has launched a number of policies to eventually build 2 nanometer chips, which are the highest end in semiconductor technology. But there's a lot between where we are today and where we need to be. I guess the question for you is twofold, and you can take it in any direction you wish. One is around just the innovation DNA around not just software, but some of these semiconductor related technologies. Um, Given your view on how important innovation is, do you see the story change in India realistically in the semiconductor space? And secondly, innovation is a combination of entrepreneurs and capital. And what is the story you're seeing in terms of how capital is flowing, since you have a bird's eye view on that, into semiconductor and semiconductor related research and design capabilities? Because as far as I see, most of the money is coming from the Indian government. It's not coming from either foreign direct or private sectors in India. Sorry, that was a big question, but I gave you a canvas to paint on.
No, thank you. I think TSMC is a great company, but then Hynix is another great company, and Samsung is another great company. All of them are doing exceedingly well because there is a shortage of memory, shortage of computing, and these are the companies which are at the having the current what I call installed capacity to produce that. And when uh, literally trillions of dollars are going into data centers, these companies' computers and their memories and whatever they produce are in great demand, and people are paying literally very large sums compared to what they used to pay, like 4, 5, 10 times what was the cost last year. They are paying today, but it's capitalism, right? So the same shortage, and that's why high price is also allowing many more companies to set up their own fab, as it called, fabrication units, which is basically making manufacturing of these chips, whether it's memories or computing power or whatever, right? And that's where many of them are actually currently setting up, and over next 1, 2, 3 years, they are going to come into play. In fact, today there is a news that a Chinese company got listed, which is into chip manufacturing, and China was not greatly into chip manufacturing. You may recall that Nvidia was not
Yes.
allowed to be exported, but that company has developed chips which now Apple wants to put in, and that company got listed yesterday, and its prices went up by 10 times, that is 1000% on listing, and made it perhaps the largest company in China in terms of the market capitalization. So these are what I call gyrations of a shortage economy that happens in many areas, but specifically it has happened because of the great projections that have been made about how much this frontier labs in America will be able to gain in terms of the revenues. And that's how they are, on that basis, they're actually investing into setting up very large data centers, very large data centers near the places where there is enough water and also electricity available. And so, for me, some portion or some large portion of America's last 3 years uh, growth rate, which has gone up, is largely due to this great hope about American AI making up so much value from rest of the world that it is justifiable, and that's why they are now buying up everything that is available from the people who manufacture this sort of GPUs and CPUs and memory chips and other things. And it is possible that this may give them good results, but it is possible that this may not work out. And if that happens at some point in time, then what will happen is this current shortages will turn itself into a huge overcapacity, because not only these people have capacity now, in next 2 3 years you will have very large amount of capacity coming out, not only from uh, Taiwan and Korea, but also from India, America, and European countries, which are actually setting up fabs all over. India has currently at least 15 to 20 plants which are coming up, and contrary to your perception that government of India is spending money, it's basically the Microns and other people who are setting up their plants, which are in a way being given some incentives by government of India to if they reach a particular milestone of production, then they will get a little bit of a incentive for setting that up, and that Indian government also did for say phone manufacturing. If you recall, in 2021 22, uh, all the iPhones were manufactured in China. And Financial Times ran full page stories, I think twice or thrice in different ways, to say that China is so far ahead in the game of electronic manufacturing and its supply chain that no country in next 50 or 100 years can ever copy that or sort of replicate that, so that iPhones can be made then. And within 3 years' time, India was making like 10% of all the iPhones in the world manufactured, and now probably 30% or even more. And that is true with Samsung phones, and many of the phone companies which are not of Chinese origin are now making very large number of phones. But they were also given some incentives that if you reach so much of sort of target of the value which needs to be manufactured, or value addition, then you will get so much incentives. And so it's a way that China has done it. Of course, democracies cannot do it, but India has been successful in getting this high tech manufacturing in India. And now, as a backward integration, it is also got one or two plants already of Fab, that is chip manufacturing, have already gone on live. And you might recall that although the chip may be manufactured by even now Taiwanese companies or Korean companies, but many of those chips are being designed in India. India was always a design center for many of the companies from Texas Instruments onwards. In early 90s, there was a company called Texas Instruments. And India has a great talent available and being used by all the software and hardware companies to many sort of design chips, which are then manufactured in the fabs in plants across the world. But design wise, India is like top of the line, whether it's 2 nanometers or
Ashish,
below.
I fully agree with you that setting up the manufacturing base for fabs, chip manufacturing, is really at an inflection point in India, and it's taking off. I agree with that. And I also agree with your supply demand analysis that the current market valuations may simply be a reflection of, demand exceeding supply. But this demand may not be accurate, and you may end up with overcapacity, and then the stock valuations and the MSCI weightages may be different. In fact, I your point made me reflect and said, I would love to see the MSCI weightage on Cisco in the early 90s when the internet revolution took off, and what is the weightage today. And the Cisco network equipment was the supply that was a critical requirement of the internet revolution and today's chips. So I get the point you're making and I agree with it. However, there was a second part to my question, which is real R&D, right? Um, we have heard about a vision to get to 2 nanometer chips and 3 nanometer chips. Today, India is manufacturing 28 nanometer chips. Um, to get from 28 to 2, uh, that requires real R&D inside India, and design is a good step to go there, but it requires innovation in chemicals and the underlying um, um, chip manufacturing technology, and so on and so forth. I'm no expert on it, but it requires a significant expense in R&D. India traditionally has invested not more than 0.6% of its GDP in R&D, mostly in pharma, maybe defense. Um, Whereas countries like Korea and South Korea, sorry, and Hong Kong and US are anywhere between 3 to 5%. Do you see that investment in R&D increase as you look at the capital markets? Semiconductors is a microcosm of that, but it could be broader. I'd love to hear your views on how real is the possibility that India really becomes an R&D hub, or will it always be, you guys do the R&D, we will figure out the innovative uses?
For me, I think it's the other way around. That
Hmm,
what you talk about R&D spend is actually accounting spend.
hmm,
In R&D, you can spend a billion and you can or a trillion and come out with nothing. And the other side, you can spend nothing and still come out with $1 trillion product, right? And so many of what you consider as R&D is actually being invested upon by, say, American or European companies, but brains are in India. It's just that its accounting treatment is in Europe or in America. So you think it's happening in America. That is one hypothesis, that many of those GCCs, even in biosciences or lasers or anything, many of them actually the brains are employed in India. The IP remains in America or Europe, but those brains are still working, right? So that is where the second part comes, that how many of the real new medicines have been
hmm,
invented by large companies.
hmm,
It is 1 to 5 people teams which probably had some exposure. They come out, they set up their labs and actually create the large company. How many of you actually see the chat GPT, how the OpenAI was formed, and then Anthropic came out of it, or many other sort of frontier labs in AI came out? They did not come out because you invested $1 trillion. You are now investing $1 trillion in the hope that they will create gazillion dollars. But basically, none of them did not came out because somebody spent $1 trillion and then there was a deterministic framework to bring it out. I'm telling you, this is a very indeterministic activity. You can work for a long time and suddenly it sparks, right? So, and many of these people who are doing R&D are sitting in
hmm,
India. They have again used this techniques, methodologies. They then come out of those companies which they work for later on, and some of them are starting their own labs and things like that, right? So that's where India's pharmaceutical industry grew, and that's how it will grow in many other areas. And that's true with IT. India grew with Texas Instruments connecting the first time the satellite link between India and US, and that's how uh, the Texas Instruments Bangalore facility actually could do remote development of software, and then India became a kind of a powerhouse in software development. And so I have no doubt in my mind that what is required is brains which are willing to work hard, go that extra mile, connect, which have exposure to different situations. And that's where for me India will continue to do R&D. It's just that it might be in somebody's sort of accounts books, and of course IP might be for them. But it's possible that some of the Indians who have now made their money using the same framework. And there are now literally hundreds of billion-dollar startups in India, and also many of, I mean, literally more than 400 billionaires, even from the old economy. They would all be searching, and they are searching for a new best way to sort of improve their businesses, go into other businesses, and that's why I have no doubt that an opportunity will arise, or opportunities have already come up to many of them, and I keep on hearing their stories. Every day, some or other person comes and tells the stories, and that happened in even say solar energy. India was considered laggard, but it's currently adding huge amount of solar capacity in terms of installed capacity, because it's also having abundant sunlight, literally 12
That's
months a year. And so
yeah.
for me, India will do what is commercially viable for its people, but India is not a what I call a top-down country like China is. China decides and they can do it. In India, government can decide and people will figure out their own way. So for me, India is what I call a bottoms-up framework, and it's very, very important that they remain frugal in their innovations, but also world class. And that is what they've learned by exposure over the last 30 years. That you need to be world class. They have got exposure, they have connects, they have networks across the world, and that's why I have no doubt that many of them will do well going forward using whatever means they have available. They don't have to spend, like even in COVID time. Uh, I recall the American vaccines were costing probably $38 or something, 28 to $38. Indian vaccine required only $1 to not only manufacture but also administer. And that's where the difference in scale, also in using your brains to achieve solutions comes, right? And so for me, it's not that you put in $1 trillion, you come out with a COVID vaccine. We just put in very little, and still we had like two independent vaccines which we didn't use only for ourselves, but for the entire world. And many of them, many of those countries got it free, right? Not even a dollar they paid. And that's where the way India works is slightly different from these accounting sort of situations which many of us keep on sort of talking about. That doesn't mean you should not be spending. If you have the means, and if you have an sort of a target to achieve something which you think is going to be commercially beneficial, you should invest.
Hmm. I think that's a very interesting perspective. I mean, this conversation is so rich that I could keep talking about this, but I also we are I'm actually going longer than I usually do, but this is so interesting. So I will ask another question. You sort of set it up on the lowest layer of the AI stack, energy and infrastructure, right? So the applications use the LLMs, which are processed by the chips, which sit in data centers that need energy. And India is currently expanding its data center footprint. Today, I believe it uses less than 1% of the energy. In the future, it may need more than 5 to 6% of the total energy consumption of India. And that means energy is a big deal. Now, if there's one area that I have seen a lot of momentum in India, is around energy, especially renewable energy. You mentioned solar energy. I believe 50% of the installed capacity in India is renewable now. Uh, but this is just the beginning, because installed capacity doesn't mean produced energy. You need to have storage capacity and things like that. Um, how do you see the energy revolution play out in India, because it is so central to the AI story? In fact, if there's one place where the United States is facing challenges, is public backlash on setting up data centers, political resistance to setting up nuclear reactors. How is that story playing out in India around data centers deployment and nuclear energy and the necessary grid infrastructure that is required to support this?
So in a way, each summer you can see India is kind of climbing up in terms of the number of sort of gigawatt used, not only installed, because summer is when India has a very tough time in around middle May end. After June, the world starts seeing the summer. India has a special season called monsoon where it starts raining, and that's why the heat comes down because of the cloud cover and other things. But broadly, India is doing very well on energy uh, installation and consumption. There are literally uh, farms of solar cells coming up over hundreds of kilometers, doing hundreds of gigawatts being installed all the time. And the way I look at it is why India needs to go for renewable vis-a-vis, say, America. America has a lot of uh, carbon oriented energy production where it's self sufficient. Not only self sufficient, it's able to actually export. While as India and to some extent China both are dependent quite a lot on imported carbon based energy, that is oil and gas and other things, LPG and CNG and other things. And so that's why they would be dependent, or they would want to be independent of the carbon based pricing, which keeps on moving with all the wars that people fight for energy and things like that. And so if you are able to kind of move away from your dependence, you will be better off. You will have better control over your policies, because if a oil barrel is costing $50 and someday within few weeks it's going to reach $150, your entire calculations go awry. And that's where India is clearly trying to kind of hedge against the pricing, which kind of moves so fast and so much. And that's where I think it's going to work there. But the other side of AI story is also true, that we have been made to believe that there is only one way to do AI is centralized AI. That is, you require lots of large data centers, like $200 billion. Yesterday, I read that I think NVIDIA is trying to uh, give guarantee for OpenAI's $200 billion data center. Now, for me, there is one way to do it very large, uh, and so many chips and so many things and so much of energy. Other is the mobile part. And so, India being sunlight abundant, it's actually able to have it recharged from everyone's solar cell on their rooftop, right? And so it's going to be a very interesting play. The other part you touched upon, which is interesting, is the nuclear energy. The nuclear energy has been very important to India. We have been wanting to do things in a particular metal called thorium. Normally, the nuclear energy is produced using uranium, plutonium, and all, which are again controlled in terms of their supply by some specific countries. And India recently also tied up with some of those suppliers in various parts of the world to continue to provide its uranium for its uh, energy purposes. But it's also now uh, kind of created a few more experiments and technologies which allow it to use thorium. And thorium is abundant, literally large part of South India's coastal zone have sand which is thorium, has a lot of thorium there. And that's where India is now experimenting. Over next few years we will figure out how this thorium related nuclear energy is working. Other side, India has its own uranium based and plutonium based frameworks also available. And so overall, India will continue to explore hydrogen, the the dam based energy production, wind based energy production, solar based energy production, and also uh, any other way that comes in, including the nuclear energy, so that it has a kind of a right balance or right mix of energy sources, which will give it a little bit of a flexibility in its overall energy policy.
So this was a very interesting for those of you who had questions around, is AI on the right side? Is India on the right side of the AI trade? The point that Ashish is making is that it depends on what time frame you're making that trade in. If you take a long-term view, then don't overreact to the valuation of TSMC today or the valuation of a large language model. Let the movie play out, and in that world, where you take a mid to long-term view, India, Ashish, you're saying, is indeed on the right side of the AI trade, or can be if they innovate and go in the direction that you're describing. Is
Thank
that
you.
a fair assessment of what you're
Yeah,
saying?
absolutely. I'll give you one more point or pointer. 2 weeks back, there were news items in stock markets that almost 3 to 4% of Korean population, was having margin calls on the same companies, or the index which they had invested in, because they had invested huge amounts in the euphoria, and then those stock prices were coming down because the smart money was now moving out, saying it has reached a level which is not sustainable. And so when the prices started moving out or moving down, people who had taken large sort of positions in as individuals were now being called upon to bring more money, which they could not bring. And that's what was actually the reason for prices to go down further, because then their position gets sold out, and so the prices go down further. And so this kind of euphoria in any activity uh, is basically going to create that kind of shortages, that kind of price bubbles, not only in the memory chips but also the stock prices of those companies. And then when they come down quite a lot and take sometimes the entire society together. And if you recall the 1920s and the things that happened, which brought in the 1929 Great Depression in USA and Europe. It's basically what I call the excesses of capitalism, uh, which is what brings you to that kind of sort of situations. But overall, there will be cycles, ups and downs in the technologies. The speed of technology, the way it's coming, is going to be much faster than what we have seen before. And AI is just I mean, what we call AI today is just a first step. It's only 3 4 years since it has come to some real usage in a day-to-day life, uh, and 90 to 95% people are not paying any money to use that AI. You know that. Uh,
Yes.
Only 5 to 7% people are actually paying the money for sort of usage. And there is a hope in these all these companies that somehow these people who are not able to pay the money to them are going to somehow figure out uh, and then pay them the money, although they will not have increase in their income which is commensurate. And for me, that hypothesis will work only if there is a virtuous cycle of somebody increasing productivity of individuals then buying up those services, and then there sort of there is a virtuous cycle of interdependence comes in. When you think I will take all the money, no money on table, then everyone will die, then nobody will buy your products, right? So that's where I think this entire hypothesis, or that sort of the game that is coming out, is looking very sort of difficult to sustain going forward. And many people have actually made claims, like Satya Nadella has talked about you losing your alpha. That is, you, if how your company works, it goes on to the frontier labs and they will sell it to other people, then your company is gone. And that is, I think the Palantir CEO also has said similar things. So for me, you will see some of this situations coming up. But broadly speaking, open weight, open source AI is here to stay. The closed source, what I call frontier models, which are required for like top of the line work, but then top of the line work doesn't give you the day to day normal sort of grunge work related money, because they will do it at a much cheaper cost. And that's where you will and slowly figure out that where the business models of which type of activities lie, and you will have a full variety of sort of operating systems. You have at Linux to sort of many operating systems, and all of them survived for very long. And that's how this is going to be. It's going to be a garden with many flowers of different types, and not one single type of flowers. Yeah.
The time is right for innovations to happen in India, is what you're saying. You need innovators who can only take advantage as this AI becomes more democratized across the various stacks. Ashish, I must say this has been a fascinating discussion. We've overshot our time together, but that's simply because of the richness of the discussion we had. I wanted to leave this thought, if you don't mind, I know your son is an entrepreneur. You have been an entrepreneur. If there was one piece of advice you'd like to leave behind for an innovator anywhere in India or across in the world of AI, if you could spend just 30 seconds to a minute on it.
I mean, if you are an entrepreneur, try to be profitable, because people
Very simple, huh?
people who are lucky to get billions to burn with very little revenues are very few. And if you are lucky, good luck. But largely speaking, if you're profitable, it's going to actually allow you to last longer and try whatever you are trying to do for much longer. Probably it will allow you to scale also later on. But if you scale a lot but not profitably, it can uh, bring you down very rapidly, very fast. And for me, I've seen that. I have done business old way in IT, being profitable. And I tell my son also the same, that of course AI will allow you to, he's into AI, and I have told him that AI will allow you to do things like 10 times, 100 times faster, better. But if you don't have a profitability, then no amount of money can save you. Like in our country, we have a adage that who is the richest person on the earth? That the person who spends less than his income. And who is the poorest person in the world? Is the person who spends more than his income, right? And so for me, if you want to be rich, try to be spending less on the overall compared to what you earn, right?
Love it. Love it. Very practical advice, and one that is often forgotten by many entrepreneurs who get lost in the hype of the situation. Ashish, thank you very much for your time with us. It has been a fascinating discussion.
Thank you, and I hope this was useful to all your listeners.
It was very useful, and we will continue to do this podcast every month. The next month we have the CEO of Genpact, who will talk about how AI is going to be impacting the business process outsourcing industry, uh, and I'm really looking forward to that. But in the meanwhile, thank you very much to all my audience, and hope this was interesting to all of you. Thanks, Ashish,
And
again.
thank you to Newsweek for this great platform. Thank you.